Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Ohioana Book Festival. I'm Carolyn Melvin, and I'm one of the founding members of the Sisters in Crime of Columbus, Ohio, now known as Buckeye Crime Writers. So I would like you to welcome you to our mystery panel. The title of our panel is In the Footsteps of Nancy Drew, Writing Exciting Female-Led Mystery Series in the 21st Century. This is an outreach program for the Toledo Lucas County Public Library and their 90th anniversary celebration with the Nancy Drew exhibit. You can learn more about the exhibit on their blog at toledolibrary.com. We're happy to say that it's also part of Ohioana's new Ohio Literary Trail. We want to thank our festival sponsors and partners, all of whom you can find listed on the Ohioana website. And many thanks to our official bookseller, the Book Loft of German Village. You can get copies of all of the books featured at the festival by going online to bookloft.com. So I'm extremely pleased to welcome our 5 authors. I'm going to introduce them, and if you could just raise your hand when I introduce you so that the audience knows who you are. So first I have Connie Berry, who is the author of the Kate Hamilton mysteries, including A Legacy of Murder. Second, I have Amanda Flower. There's Amanda, author of several mystery series, including the latest in the Amish Matchmaker series, Matchmaking Can Be Murder. Third, we have Anna Huber. She is the author of the Verity Kent and Lady Darby mysteries, including A Stroke of Malice. Fourth, we have Julie Lindsay, who is the author of several series, including Apple Cider Slaying, the first cider shop mystery. And last, but of course not least, we have Patricia Sargent, who is writing as Olivia Matthews. She is the author of the Sister Lou mysteries, including Alibis and Angels. So let's get started so we can focus on our authors. I'm going to ask a number of questions. We've also received some questions from mystery fans through social media. And if we have time, I'll ask a few more questions at the end. So first, I'm going to ask you a really hard question. Please tell us about yourself as a writer and what you write. I was kidding about the hard question part. So Connie, we'll go alphabetically first.
Okay, I came to fiction writing later in life, although I wrote a lot of stories as a child, but then I wrote nonfiction. And after a career teaching theology, I decided it was not too late to dip my toe in the pond. And so I began to write the Kate Hamilton mysteries, which I call traditional mysteries with cozy characteristics. They are set in the UK. Carolyn, I think you might have said that. They feature a high-end antiques dealer, Kate, and a detective inspector, Tom, from Suffolk, England.
Well, great. Thanks. Let's go with Amanda next, if you can tell us about your writing.
Sure. I'm Amanda Flower. I am so sorry. My throat. I'm Amanda Flower, and I write a number of cozy mystery series. And I've always been a mystery fan. When it was time to pick what I wanted to be a writer, when it came time to pick the genre I wanted to write in, it was always going to be mystery. My first book was Made of Murder 10 years ago this year. And the books that I'm writing now kind of run the gamut. I have my Amish mystery series, either the Amish Candy Shop series or the Amish Matchmaker. And then I also write light paranormal cozy mysteries, The Magic Garden. I had a book come out this week called Mums in Mayhem. And then I have a new private eye book coming out in two weeks from last Tuesday. So I guess 13 days, I don't know. I'm not great at math. So I mystery's been my thing from the start, so I'm really excited to be here.
Well, good. Well, thanks. Clearly an underachiever, Amanda. Of course about that. Anna, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Annalee Huber, and I was a music major in college and then took an about turn about 2 years out of school. I couldn't decide what I wanted to do, if I wanted to do my master's or something different. And I had always written as a child, and kind of set it aside when I became an adolescent. And then after college, when I was reading again, I rediscovered it and started writing my first book when I was about 24, and ever since, that's what I've done. So I write historical mysteries that have strong romantic elements. I write 2 series. The Lady Derby mysteries are set in 1830s Scotland, and they feature a portrait artist with a macabre past and her love interest, fellow gentleman inquiry agent who helps her. And then I also write the Verity Kent mysteries, which are set in post-World War I. And Verity was a British Secret Service agent during the war, so a spy. And then I also have a story in an anthology called The Deadly Hours that's coming out September 1st. So that's really coming up really close. So, yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you. Julie.
Oh, hi, I'm Julie Ann Lindsay. I write full-time now for several presses. I write romantic suspense, which have mysteries in them. I write these for Harlequin, but in the cozy area, I write the Christmas Tree Farm series as Jacqueline Frost. I write the Seaside Cafe mysteries as Bree Baker, and then I write the Cider Shop mysteries as me.
Great. Thanks. Patricia.
Hi, Carolyn. First, I just want to say thank you very much for moderating this panel. It's been a pleasure getting to know you while we've been preparing for it. And it's such a pleasure, and I'm really excited to be on this panel with my pals and these fabulous authors. I'm Patricia Sargent, and I write romance as Patricia Sargent and mysteries as Olivia Matthews. And I started in romantic suspense before I was nudged over to contemporary romances, but I missed the puzzles of suspense and mysteries, which is the reason that I started writing mysteries. And as Carolyn mentioned, I have the Sister Lou mystery series, which features a Catholic sister, not a nun, as the amateur sleuth. And March 2021, my Peach Coast Library series starts with Murder by Page 1, and that features a librarian as the amateur sleuth.
Well, that's great. You've all been extremely busy, clearly. Well, our next question, in honor of the title of our panel, is about Nancy Drew. So has Nancy Drew been an influence on you and your writing? So let's go backwards this time. Patricia?
I think that Nancy Drew has actually that character has had an impact on my career. Nancy Drew has proved that female amateur sleuths could be popular and could be successful and have a longevity. And that's the impact that that character has had, not just on my writing, but my career, I think.
That's great. Julie?
Absolutely. I went to a low, underfunded, maybe even, school in my youth, and there were very few books in the library, so I found myself, all of us, borrowing the same things over and over again. I guess I kind of do that now when I borrow my favorites, but back then it was more necessity. And I read all of these Nancy Drews. We must have had every one, so the librarian must have loved her because we had all of the Nancy Drews, and just by happenstance, I think I came to them and I read them and I read them, and at that point in my life, I think it really did impact who I was becoming. As an elementary school kid, you have limited power of yourself and decision making and all that. And here was this, teenage girl. She wasn't that much older than me, and she was just taking charge and getting things done and showing the boys up, and I loved it. And I would like to think that she kind of changed my trajectory a little.
Anna, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Nancy Drew is the first real mystery story that I ever remember reading. It's funny, I was about 8 or 9, and I actually won a Nancy Drew book from a white elephant game prize thing at church. And so that was the first time I read the book, and I still have it. And it was just kind of from there. I used to bike to our public library to check out Nancy Drew books. And it was just, I'm reading all the ones I could get my hands on. And I even had my own like Nancy Drew style series that I was writing in elementary school. And I still have those tucked away in a box somewhere. So definitely had an effect on me. And I've loved mystery ever since. So.
How about you, Amanda?
Absolutely. I read a couple of the original Nancy Drews, but as you know, it's gone through several different series over time, written by multiple people under the same pen name. But so I was in high school in the 90s, so I read the Nancy Drew Files, which was like kind of like an updated version of Nancy Drew. I was also working in my local library, so anytime they came into the library, I'd, scoop them up before the patrons could get them. And I think one of the first books which I never finished when I was a teenager, I started writing a book, and I still have it like in pencil in a spiral notebook, but it was definitely modeled a little bit after Nancy Drew, because she had like 2 best friends, and they were like solving like a small town murder and stuff like that. And there was like a cute boy and all the Nancy Drew elements. So she definitely had an influence.
And Connie, how about you?
Well, first of all, let me just say that after listening to all the others tell about their books, I am clearly the slacker on this panel, writing just one. But as for Nancy Drew, I honestly can't think of any female writer who hasn't been influenced by Nancy Drew. And I don't know where I got the books. I read the original ones, and they were actually old books by the time I got them. So I'm thinking that my mom must have gotten them somewhere or borrowed them, but I wasn't as clued in as Julianne thinking about the woman taking charge. I was just so impressed with the fact that she had her car. She had a blue Roadster, and I was like so impressed with that. And she had a boyfriend. So I was just totally blown away. And I think she had an effect, not just on my writing of mysteries. I think Nancy Drew had an effect on my lifelong love of reading. I loved the stories. They just reading got to be a part of my life, and I went on from there to other people. But yeah, just really key.
Me too. I read them all. They were very inexpensive. That is probably a testament as to how long ago I was born. But it seems to me, they were 60 or 75 cents. And that was, my parents never minded if I spent money on books. So that was my big treat when I was a kid. So the next couple of questions deal with your writing process. So the next question is, can you tell us about your writing process and the way you brainstorm, the way you come up with story ideas? So Julianne, would you be okay to start? Sorry.
Sure. So my writing process right now, I originally was someone who just sat down and wrote just sort of dreamily. But as the contracts started piling up and the deadlines did, for me, in order to meet those deadlines or to trust myself to meet the deadlines, I had to start plotting, which I know we'll probably talk about moving forward. But yeah, I rely on plotting and planning. I just try to come up with a way to be clever, I guess. I know when I read mysteries, I get a little thrill as I see things that I think will be a clue or that matter. And when they come together at the end, I get a little victory. And if it doesn't work out, I like the author to explain what I missed exactly. So I keep all that in mind as I put them together so that I can just make a fun challenge for the reader.
That's great. Patricia?
As I've gotten older, my writing process has changed just a little bit. I always start with the character, what the character wants, why she wants it, what's keeping her from getting it, what secrets does she have, and what would happen if those secrets come out. But originally, I was one of those ripped from the headlines authors who would get story ideas from newspapers and magazines, including Entertainment Tonight and TV documentaries and stuff like that. But as I've gotten older, my story ideas come from things that interest me, because we write fiction, but our fiction is grounded in fact. And if I'm going to spend that much time and that much passion in my research, I want it to be something that I'm interested in.
Makes a lot of sense. Connie?
Well, one big change for me is I've gotten to write a lot faster. It took me 10 years to write my first novel. And then when I got a contract, I realized that wasn't going to happen. So I had to speed the process up a little bit. When I think about my writing process, one of the things that I do, I think, is think visually. So in my mind, I am seeing this playing out like on a screen somewhere. And that helps me, I think, to pull in details and to set the scene in a specific location with specific people. Also, the way I brainstorm ideas, my problem is to limit, because I usually come up with too many subplots and too many complications, and I have to kind of pare them down as I go along. But one of the things I always like to ask is, what could go wrong? And then, how am I going to get her out of it? So whenever something happens, that's kind of in the back of my mind.
That's good. Adds a lot of conflict, I would think. Amanda?
Golly, I wish my writing process was structured, but it's not. I just had this week, my 34th novel came out, and I still write as crazy as I did on book one. I'm a pantser, born and bred, I guess. I just kind of go for it. And then usually kind of 2/3 of the way through the book, I have what I call come to Jesus meeting with the book, because I need to pick a killer. I need to have this make sense. And it usually involves tears, I'm not gonna lie. So it's not pretty. It's not pretty. I have learned some tricks. I storyboard now. Like when I'm really stuck, I have a big whiteboard and I'll draw, squares, and I'll be like, find dead dude, and then the next one will be like, she talks to like the baker who saw the dead guy, the night before or whatever. So that at least I know there's like big things, like you need to like kill the person and then have the interview of the various people and resolution and all that. But it's something that someday when I have more time, I do want to make a better way of going about it. So I guess that's my answer.
Hey, whatever works for you is obviously the perfect thing to do. So that's great. Anna?
So I'm fortunate because I write series, so I already have my cast of characters kind of established. So at this point, my books are really about the characters and their journey, and then the mysteries are just the little adventures within their journey. So I already kind of know their whole arc or a portion of their arc through the series. So then when I'm getting down to, my writing process and stuff, is just telling which portion of the story, what mystery I want to go around that. And then I'm kind of a hybrid, and I use what's called the snowflake method, where I figure out like the main things, the main elements and the turning points and things, and then I feed in more and it just expands. And I also do a lot of character like worksheets, like their psychology and like what's their goal and motivation and conflict in this book and their biggest fear and all those kind of things, for the main characters and the secondary characters, because it gives me tons of ideas to feed into to the plot. So so yeah, that's pretty much my process. I do that, and then I just sit down and write. Usually I'm a little bit like Amanda, about 2/3 of the way through. I usually have to stop and then like fix stuff, because I like to leave myself room for creativity. I don't want to be too boxed in, and so it almost always changes. And so then I just have to rework it to make it work. So.
Well, Amanda already alluded to my next question. People who are writers know these terms, whether you're a plotter or a pantser or kind of a combination of the two. And for those of you in the audience who are not writers, plotters are people who outline and then start writing. Pantsers are people who just jump right in and kind of figure it out as they go along. And then the hybrid approach kind of uses a combination of both. So we already know that Amanda is a pantser, but you might have, additional details you want to share. And also, as you're answering, I guess I would be interested to know kind of what your writing routine is. Like, how do you write every day? How long you write every day? Because to those of us who haven't done what you've done, it looks like you're creating magic, but it would be wonderful if you could share some of your secrets. So, Amanda, let's start with you, since you already have admitted that you're a pantser.
I am very much a pantser. I've tried to outline several times, because I've gone to workshops, I've gone to classes, I've done like webinars, and people have made these gorgeous outlines. And I think part of it is I've just realized as I become a writer, I'm not a linear thinker, which is kind of hysterical since I write mysteries and they're linear stories. But so I don't write in chronological order when I write the book. So I might write the beginning of the book, I might write, another scene, I might write the end, and then I kind of jump around. So, and then sometimes I have to like piece it or take it apart and like move chapters because I didn't write them in order. It's kind of messy. As far as my writing routine, I do write every day, 7 days a week. Some days, this is a release week for me. So this week my writing's really been hit or miss, because I've had a lot of Zoom calls and things like that, events through libraries. So it just really depends what's going on that week. Next week, I don't have a book release. I have something on Monday, like a panel thing, but other than that, it should be a little bit easier for me to actually get some words down. But I do try to write every day, because if I don't, I lose track of the story. Even if I write just like a couple pages, like just to remind myself, because I don't want to lose time by having to go back and like, who are these people? Like, like, who is that person? Which does happen, because I write for multiple publishers. So I might be writing a novel, and then another publisher's like, hey, I need copy edits of this in like 4 days or something. And I'm like, okay, so I have to do that. And then I come back to the manuscript. I'm like, I don't know who any of you are. Like, I don't even know. So I just kind of have to juggle it. It's really an interesting situation, but I'm just so grateful, like, how many people get to do this full time. So I'm sure we're all super grateful that this is our job, even when it's a little weird and strange and hard.
Good, thank you. Connie? You may still be on mute.
There. I am definitely a hybrid. I do plot, but I plot in like broad strokes, and that gives me confidence. And I think the reason I do that is partly fear, because like I said, once I had spent 10 years writing my first novel and then realized that I had less than a year to write the second one, I realized that I didn't have time to write long stuff, chapters that were never going to make it into the book like I did with the first one. with my first one, I think I have more words that never made it into the book than I actually have in the book. So having a broad outline gives me confidence. But in every book, and here I say every book like I've written so many, I've written 3. In each of my 3 books, something that I didn't expect happens. And in the second book, for example, my protagonist, Kate, was interviewing a man who was an antiquarian, and because he knew the dead person, or no, actually, he knew one of the suspects in a murder. So she's talking to him about this, and she says, you know, something like, how can you be so sure he didn't do it? And he says, and I'm just typing along, because he's dead. And I said, he is? I honestly had no idea the character was going to say that. And then I had to go back and replot having the guy dead and how that would work in. But when that happens, it doesn't happen to me too often. It might happen to others more, but when it happens, honestly, it's exactly the right thing. So I look forward to those moments.
That's great. Patricia, how about you?
Well, like Connie, I plot. I probably plot a little bit too much. But like Connie, in part, it's like a defense against the blank page. When I first started writing, I had a full-time job, and my bosses were a little crazy because the days were really long. So when I would get home, I only had so much free time to write. So if I had a detailed plot, I could just grab a couple of scenes and run with them. I could get as much writing in that limited amount of time as possible. So that's one of the reasons that I try to do very detailed plots. But also, as Connie said, sometimes the characters are like, you don't really know me. And they'll throw a curveball that you just have to work with. And as far as my writing schedule, you know that saying, you plan, God laughs? God has deep belly laughs at my planning schedule. In my mind, I write a couple of hours on one project because, like Amanda, I have multiple projects going. So a couple of hours on one project and a couple of hours on the other. But life interrupts and you just have to roll with it. Flexibility is the name of the game.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Julie, how about you?
Okay, so I am a very, very detailed plotter. I write 7 days a week. I write on holidays. I write crazy hours. I write all the time. I try to do one project at a time, but these books are like boomerangs. Readers might not realize you pitch them off your desk, and for a while you feel like, oh, starting something fresh and it's exciting. And then a book you wrote 3 books ago is coming back for edits, or line edits, or copy edits, or content changes, or they just want you to read it again before it goes to ARCs, or then they want you to read it again before it goes to print. And so they're always coming back, and it causes us to have to, like Amanda said, jump worlds. And I've been known to write the wrong hero's name, or, you know, describe them wrong, and my editor will go, what? And then you adjust and figure it out. But as far as my daily writing, I outline. I've got it. It feels like I see Amanda's kitty's tail go by in the screen. So I know that my books are going to be 80,000 words, my cozies. In our industry, they go by word count, not pages. So I know 80,000 words. I know for me, I like a maybe 10-page chapter-ish. Sometimes they're 8, sometimes they're 12, but it's roughly 2,500 to 3,000 words. So I break it out that way. I know that for my cozies, I'm going to introduce the setting or reintroduce it in a series. I'm the heroine and everything's great, but I'm going to kill someone by the end of chapter 1 because I like to then just plow ahead. I know that by chapter 3, she's in danger or threatened in some way. And it just kind of goes this way. So I outline everything. And at first, that's all that's in there. Introduce your heroine, you know. Going backwards, I know that my final chapter, I call it a recovery chapter. It's where I want to let readers know that she's okay, the bad guy is definitely not coming back, and her relationship is stable with anyone that maybe there was some friction during her investigation. And sometimes I will even drop a character in there I'm going to kill in the next book, or allude to something that's going on in the next book to give readers some little insight of what's coming next. And I just plan it all out that way. And then I might spend 3 or 4 days, up to a week tops, usually 3 or 4 days, really beefing up this outline. And I've been known to color code it, more so when I was a newer writer, because my first couple cozies, I had the editors come back to me and say, did she quit her job because she hasn't been to work in 100 pages, or called off because I was so busy investigating that I forgot she's got a life going on. So I add everything in there, right with the chapter, what day it is in her world versus how many days since the murder. I remind myself to reset the scene in my romances if I'm going to switch point of views from hero to heroine, which I don't do in cozy, but still, if I'm changing heads, I remind myself to reset the scene, because you and I could be at dinner at the same table in the same restaurant, but we're having 2 different experiences depending on who we are. So I put all of that in there, and by the end, I can read my outline, which might get up to 15 pages long in bullet points, but I can reread that, and it's almost like Cliff Notes. And I can tell if something's out of order, or if I started a thread or a character that I thought was going to be great and he fizzled out halfway through. And then it's so much easier to delete bullet points referencing that person or that thing than it was when I had written the book, to go back and look for every reference and try to delete it, and then try to fill that hole organically or make it look organic. So yeah, so that's what I do. And then each day I write 1 chapter a day. That's my goal. I write 1 chapter. I've got 2 girls I send the chapter to, and then I move on to some other aspect, marketing or something else. The next day, the girls have sent the chapter back with anything that they found, little typos or anything, just anything. I make the changes and start the next chapter. So I'm able to turn around a novel every 6 to 8 weeks, pretty clean that way. That's how I do it.
Wow, that's impressive. Thank you for sharing that. Anna.
I am definitely a hybrid. I cannot start without having some idea of where I'm going. And because I write history and I use a lot of real history and with my characters, every book is a little different. So some of my books, like An Artless Demise, it followed the London Burkers when they were apprehended in their trial and all of that. I had to follow that like really, really closely. And so my story had to echo that. So that was really intensely plotted. Whereas then other books, if it's more fluid and I'm using history, but it's not specific moments or a specific trial or something. I kind of more of a flow, and I can kind of give myself some more room to play. I used to try to plot more stringently, but then I had a couple books where I would get to the end and somebody else would stand up and say, no, I'm the killer. And I liked it so much better that I decided that I would start plotting it so that I had several options for the killer, but not decide until I got like 2/3, 3/4 of the way through, just because my mind was working that way. And so I was like, just adjust, work with how your brain works. Connie mentioned this, that your characters will do crazy things. I have one book where something totally bizarre happens in the middle of the book that I thought someone who was dead shows up. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was like so much better. And so then I had to change everything. But it was like, you kind of need to let your brain have that play and that, or I do. I just need to let it have that play and that creativity, and it just ends up better. So it's so cool how every author's brain works differently. Some people need to plot stringently and some people need to have nothing and just go. So anybody who wants to be an author, that's what you need to know. You just need to figure out how your brain and how your creativity works, because you can ask 100 authors and you'll get 100 answers. So And then my writing day, I actually have two little girls. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. So it's a little crazy, especially this year. It was really crazy. My 6-year-old just went back to school this week. So I'm kind of getting back to a little bit of normal. Although we don't have our babysitter. So my husband and I are juggling working at home and taking care of the 3-year-old. So we kind of split the day, the school day. I get my 6-year-old on the bus and then I get to work. And I work for so many hours and I get as much done as I can. And then I have to take over and I try to do emails and stuff while my 3-year-old might be watching TV or something. But that's just, you just kind of make it work like any working parent or anyone who has, you know, other jobs and things like that. So.
Good. Well, thank you. I think I wanted to go next to the topic of research. I know some of you do a lot of research for your books. So the question is, what kind of research do you do, and how long do you spend researching before you begin a book? So Connie, if it's okay with you, I'll start with you since I am somewhat familiar with researching your process.
Yeah, like Anna, my novels are set in the present day, but each of them is very much involved with the past, and that is kind of wrapped up with Kate's profession as a high-end antiques dealer, that the antiques all have a past, and so history plays a big part. Not so much national histories, but personal histories, people's personal histories. And a lot of my research has to do with just what things are like in the UK. They are different than they are in the US. There are different words. There are different cultural norms. And part of my research, actually, up until COVID, was actually going there, which is really fun. We had a trip, a research trip planned last spring, which had to be canceled. I was really sad about that. But there's nothing like being in the setting where your book is, if it's a real setting. I grew up in the high-end antiques trade, so a lot of my research is just brushing up on some details, but you know, I know what that life is like because that's the life that my parents led and that I led along with them. But there's always an aspect. My current work in process, for example, one of the ideas for it I got from an NPR show that I remembered from 18 years ago. And it was an idea that had just stuck with me. And I was so fascinated with it. I think I was listening to it on the way driving somewhere, and I just got so immersed in it. And that never left me. So that's going to play a part in my work in progress. And also, something that Bill Bryson said in his latest book, that kind of played into it too. So just, you know, but then that sets me on a path of research. So one of the things I'm doing is talking about caravan holiday camps in England, which were huge back in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s. And so I've been doing a lot of research about that. Another aspect is kind of a wealthy person's insane asylum. And there was a real one called Holloway Sanatorium. And so mine isn't Holloway, it's a fictional one, but I've been doing a lot of research on that too. And I love research. That's one of my problems, is that I get so caught up in the research that I forget to write. You know, I could just keep researching forever. That's a fun part.
Well, good. Clearly you love what you're doing.
I do.
Amanda, how about you? Do you do a lot of research for your books?
I do. So usually with the first book in the series is when a lot of the heavy research is happening. So what I like to do is kind of read like general history, general information about that culture or place that I'm writing about. So when I started writing Amish, I went to the library and got every book I could find about the Amish and read as many of them as I could. but like Connie said, going to the place where the story is set, there's like really no substitute for that. So I've been, I live near Amish country. We kind of all do, since we're Ohioans or in Indiana. And so I can go there whenever and get some different details. For my Scottish series, my series set in Scotland, I went there twice as part of the research for the series and stayed in the Aberdeenshire where the story is set, and just stayed there. I didn't move around. I wanted to know that particular place because just like every country, each region has its own stuff and their own norms and their own culture. So I think, and you might touch on this later, I think it's going to be interesting as I have a new series coming up and I want to travel for it very much because there's something I need to know. With COVID, I'm hoping I can get to where I need to get. So because I think without being there, I think it might hurt my story a little bit. So even if I can't go into the research place where I want to go, I might just go to the area and walk around and peep in the windows like a crazy person. I don't know. I just need to absorb the place. It's important to me. So.
Well, we'll hope that you're able to do that.
Thank you.
Anna, how about you? I'm quite sure you do a lot of research for your book.
I do. So like Amanda said, when I start a series, I do like months and months of research because like for me, it's not just the setting, it's the time period, it's the fashion, it's the language, everything. And I really love to read like first person accounts of things, diaries and letters and stuff, because you just get a real feel for language. I love language and the way people speak to each other in that era. Like the way they speak in 1830 is totally different from the way they speak in 1919, my two different series. And there's, I think it's the music major in me, but there's like a rhythm and to the dialogue, and it's almost musical. I mean, there's a feel to different eras. So, and I've traveled to the UK, and gone, we took a big trip and went a lot of places, different places I was planning to set things. And then, I had my girls, and so I haven't been able to travel for a few years because they were just too little. So, and with COVID, we were supposed to go and haven't. So I have a book I'm writing right now. I've not been to the location. So, and I've written other books where I've not been to the location, and you really have to rely on, the research books and, Google Earth and all those videos of locations. With history, there's another tricky aspect because the way things look now may not be how they looked back then, or they may never have even existed at that point. So finding historical maps or travel books. Oh, travel books are wonderful. Like for my post-World War I series, there's actually travel guides because people would travel to the battlefields. Like less than a year after World War I was over, they would go to the trenches and visit these places where there were still bodies decaying and bombs and shells not uncovered. And because they were desperate to see where their family members had died. And so there was tours, and I found some of these tour guides. And so those were invaluable to see what did it really look like in 1919, a year after the war, so all those kind of things. And I love research too, like Connie said, so I could go on and on. It's just, I think depending on what you write, especially, you just have to love what you are writing about in your research, because otherwise it'd be drudgery. So yeah, it's fun.
Well, thank you. Julianne, how about you?
I kind of research what I'm writing doesn't require a ton of in-depth research. It's all contemporary. Each book has its own little thing. So I do kind of research as necessary as I go for each book. Yeah, that's about it. I enjoy it. So it's a lot of fun, but it doesn't take me nearly as much time as Anna. And I too like to go the places. So thankfully I got to everywhere I needed to be before the plague hit. But yeah, there's just something about being there, right?
Absolutely. So Patricia, how about you? Do you rely on research for your books?
Yes, and as Anna and Connie said, so it's so delicious doing the research, but at some point you gotta cut yourself off and actually start writing. I research my characters and my settings. What kind of job do they do? What kind of background and education do they need in order to do that job? What does their typical day look like? What got them into that field? And it's the same thing with their hobbies as well. What do their hobbies say about them? Why are they attracted to a particular hobby? So, for example, with my Murder by Page One story, it's set in Georgia, and one of the members of the amateur sleuth team, he's an amateur chef, and he likes to focus on regional cuisine and throw dinner parties where he serves it. And I didn't feel like I could share this recipe unless I knew what the recipe tasted like and how hard it was to cook it and some of the quirks with the recipe. So I said to my husband, I need to make this dish for my story. And I told him it's Southern chicken and peaches with Georgia green beans. And my husband thought for a moment and he said, can't he just do a barbecue? He just was not into the peaches and chicken idea. But it's that kind of thing that allows me to get into my character's skin. But then I have to cut myself off, and if I need to research additional information while I'm writing, then I'll just do that.
Okay, good, thank you. I think we're going to switch to some of the questions we've received from our mystery fans via social media. And I need to tell you that our readers' questions are brought to us by Johnson's Ice Cream. And I understand that anyone who asks a question through this vehicle gets free ice cream. So that probably doesn't include me. I'm sad about that. But for those who benefit from it, that will be great. So we have a number of these. Crystal has written a question to Amanda and Julianne. Have either of you ever lived among the Amish community? You created these wonderful small towns that feel so real and alive. And I just wondered if they're based on real places. So I don't know, Amanda, are they based on real places?
Kind of, yes. I did live when I was a librarian for 15 years, and my first full-time library job was in Amish country. So I moved out there. It was only 2.5 hours from where I grew up, but it definitely felt different than, I grew up in Akron, Ohio, so it was pretty different. And I lived there for 3 years when I was 24 to 27. So it was a very, first time on my own. So it definitely had an impression on me as a young adult. And then on my writing, when the time came to pitch new ideas to my agent, and she didn't like any of my ideas. And I said I used to live near the Amish, and she loved that idea because it was at the height of the Amish fiction rocket that, I just kind of jumped on the end of it. And I've been writing ever since. So the town in the Amish Candy Shop and the Matchmaker series, they are companion series. They're set in the same place, different. So one character's Amish that solves the crime in the Matchmaker series, the other person's English in the Candy Shop series. The town is based on kind of a mix of Berlin and Sugar Creek. So in Holmes County, although Sugar Creek is in Tuscarawas counties, which people don't necessarily know, it's actually in a different county. But yeah, so it is based on real places.
So Julie, how about your towns? Are they based on real places?
Not really. No, just a general experience, no place in particular. Just I've kind of tried to pick and choose all my favorite things about having lived in or spent long amounts of time in rural Ohio in small towns, or my Cider Shop series, my time spent in West Virginia. So yeah, I pick and choose my favorite aspects because I want to create a place that the readers want to come and visit and stay. But And unlike Amanda, I've never lived among the Amish. So it's probably why I love her books.
Well, good. So we have another question. This one is from Jill, addressed to Anna and Connie. And she was asking about research. She said you both write stories set in England, very different time periods. So she was asking about how much research you do. We've already covered that. But then at the end, she says, also, Gage plus Kira and Kate plus Tom forever. So I guess my question to you both is, obviously for Jill, romance plays a big part of your mysteries. So is that something that you purposefully try to put in there, and why? Connie, do you want to have any comments on that?
Yeah, the protagonists that we have are people. They're actual people, and writers often talk about the rich, full life. In other words, they don't just investigate murders and stuff like that and get into trouble. They have families, they have a past, they have hopes and dreams, they have possibly romantic interests. What a normal person would have. My protagonist, Kate, is a very young widow. She married a Scot, and he was a professor at Case Western, law professor at Case Western, emigrated over here. He died very early. She already had children, but he died. She's about, she was about 43 when he died. So she is definitely eligible, and Tom is a widower. His wife died of cancer, and so they're kind of thrown together, and they're, it's kind of natural that they would start to interact. So I have an arc for them that, multiple book arc, but the romance never overshadows the mystery. These are mysteries. And so there can be elements of romance, but the main storyline has to always involve the mystery.
So how about you, Anna? I guess you must also include romance in your books.
Yeah, I do. I actually, when I started writing, I tried to write historical romance first, but I kept having mysteries creep in and take everything over. So I decided, I realized what I really wanted to write was historical mysteries and then have the romance as the subplot. Just because, as Connie said, they're real people, they're real characters. And I think of my books as really about the main characters and the characters around them. It's their story and their journey. And then the mystery is the plot and the adventure, and the romance just adds that extra jeopardy and that extra emotion. And it's the realness of who they are. And in my Lady Darby series with Kira and Gage, the first book, The Anonymous Wife, she's in the darkest place of her life. I mean, she had a horrible first marriage. Her first husband was abusive, and he, used her artistic talents and forced her to sketch his dissections for an anatomy textbook he was writing. So very dark place. She's a huge scandalous figure because all this came out. And so it's her journey and her realization that, not all men are bad, and that Gage really brings out the best in her, and she brings out the best in him. And it's this whole, he's even in a dark place. So it's this whole ability to provide an arc for that. And, for my Verity Kent series, Verity and Sydney, they're a married couple who have been married right when the war started. They've been apart basically for 4.5 years, and they both have been keeping secrets from each other this whole time because she couldn't tell him she's a spy, and he can't tell her about what happens in the war. And so they come back together, and what happens? How do you rebuild a marriage? So it just adds that extra jeopardy. And I think there are some readers who don't like romance and some that really love it in their books. So it's, I don't know, it's just almost a necessity for me. I just feel like my characters have to have that because it's just such a natural extension of who we are as humans, most of us. So.
Good. Well, the next question isn't really a question, but it's a comment, and it's directed to Patricia. So I didn't want to leave you out here, but Tessa says thank you to Patricia for being an inspiration to women of color who want to be cozy mystery writers. She says, I find it difficult to find many stories I wish to read that are written by people who look like me, so I am thrilled when you release a new book. So kudos and compliments to Patricia from Tessa. So we just have a few minutes more. So there are two questions that I would like to ask. These are also from the fans, not directly from me. But Kayla wants to know, and since several of us have cats sitting with us, myself included, she asks, why do you think that so many mystery readers feature a cute animal in the story, especially cats? So I don't know that we each have to address that, but if any one or two people want to take that one, what do you think? Amanda, you're a cat person. Why do we include cute animals, especially cats?
Especially cats. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I am an animal lover, so I cannot personally imagine writing a story without an animal character. Because I just think animals add a richness to the story. You learn a different facet of, especially if it's the pet of the protagonist or an animal the protagonist rescues, you learn about their character, their caringness for another life, something like that. And I think we feature them to show, kind of like Anna and Connie were saying with the romance, to show they're a whole person. You know, they're not just a candy shop person by day, sleuth by night. Like, they have a real life with pets and boyfriends and mothers and all that good stuff. So I think it, especially in cozies, I think that fits well with the genre, to have that like a round character that way.
Good. Well, thanks. Well, I'll go to the last question and then I'll wrap this up. Caitlin writes, why do you all think that people are so fascinated with and continue to read and watch stories about amateur sleuths, from Nancy Drew to Sherlock Holmes to everybody in between, and particularly female sleuths? Thank you, and please keep writing all of your wonderful books. So why do you think we keep going with amateur sleuths, particularly female sleuths? I think pretty much we're all dealing with amateur sleuths here. Maybe not universally, but what do you think? Julianne, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll give this one a try. Speaking for me personally, I think it's fun to get, I mean, it's an adventure and it's a safe adventure, right? You can live like vicariously through these women who are brave and confident, or, you know, they're not afraid to make mistakes. They're driven for the right reasons. They're trying to do the right thing. So they become like friends. You get to know their friends and their community, and it's a place to belong. It's escape from whatever maybe more difficult thing you've been through today. And you're guaranteed to have a happy ending. You don't have to deal with a ton of blood, guts, and gore. You can just go on this wild ride with your friend and live it with her. And I think we need more fun and release like that in the world. And I think that's why Hallmark movies and amateur sleuths are so popular right now.
Good, thanks. Patricia, do you have anything you might want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. Studies have shown that women in particular are voracious readers. We will read anything and everything. We're just voracious readers. And for me, I think one of the reasons that I'm so drawn to read cozy mysteries with amateur sleuths is the same reason that I'm drawn to write that. It's because we want to believe that we have some level of control, and that at the end of the day, good will triumph over evil. Hopefully within 300 to 400 pages. But by the end of the day, goodwill went out. And if I could also tack on something to Tessa's really lovely comment about when mystery writers of color, we're not quite as rare as some people may think. That we're not in large numbers, but we're growing, and we have a community, crime writers of color. You can actually find crimewritersofcolor.com on the website. It's an encouraging community to help introduce diversity into reading.
Well, good. Well, thank you, all of you. You've been wonderful panelists, and I really appreciate all of your answers. I kind of wish we had another hour, because clearly there are a lot of things that we could discuss, but unfortunately we're limited to an hour. So I wanted to thank you also to the Toledo Lucas County Public Library, to our panelists, Connie Berry, Amanda Flower, Anna Huber, Julianne Lindsay, and Patricia Sargent, writing as Olivia Matthews. A reminder to everyone that you can get copies of the books that have been written by each of our authors from the Book Loft of German Village at bookloft.com. And thanks again to all of our festival sponsors and partners. And thank you, the audience, for joining us. Please check out the Ohioana website for all of this year's festival programming. So thank you very much.